Larry, the Chessperado Cohen here with more chess oddities, chess intricacies, and chess laughs. Today I'm going to show you a game from the 1998 Karpov Simul in Las Vegas. This was the former world champion Anatoly Karpov played white, which he did for all the boards. Black was my brother Howard Cohen. A little funny thing about all this was that I had a deal with my brother for that tournament. I was paying the hotel and the airfare, he was paying the food and the entry fees. And of course he didn't want to shell out the extra $50 a person for putting the names in for the Karpov simul drawing. However, I insisted. So, of course, since he didn't want to enter the names, he, of course, got picked. No big surprise there. You know how those things can work. Another interesting thing related to all this was that although I didn't know how I was going to get picked, I brought a spare of my endgame execution t-shirt to give to the former world champion. I had my brother present it to him. Mr. Karpov, however, refused. Somehow that's not too surprising. What is surprising is that later on, I had my brother offer it to him again, and Mr. Karpov actually took the t-shirt. Whether he just used it as a rag, gave it away, or outright threw it out, that's another matter. And the one other crazy thing about all this is, of course, I went and got his signature. It's actually in a safety deposit box, but I got him to sign a copy of, I hope you can see it okay, this little diagram I had on the right there for my local club bulletin. The caption for the Hulk and the thing reads, Gary's next seconds versus Deep Blue. This was just after he had lost the Deep Blue match. I honestly believe that GM Karpov had no idea what he was signing. It was just, well, here's this chess fan, wants something signed, and he went and signed it. No idea really what he was signing. In any case, let us look at the game. Let me tilt up the board so you can see things better. Just a second here. And hopefully it should make it a little better for you all. So, E4, G6, D4, D6, Knight C3, C6, which is sort of what Howard was playing at the time. Although, since Karpov was a well-known Caro-Kann player, playing C6 does seem a bit of a challenge or a risk. But it's a sound enough opening play on Black's part. Whoops, sorry. I screwed up. Move 3. Knight F3, not Knight C3, sorry. Knight F3. Knight F3, C6, C4. Now, Bishop G4 pins the knight. Bishop E2 unpinning the knight. Knight D7. Now, Knight C3. Bishop G7. After all, you did push the pawn. You usually feed general the bishop. Bishop E3, little added protection on the pawn. At this point, Howard plays E5. Now the computer likes C5, but I can understand why you might be reluctant to do that since you already pushed the C pawn once. So you might be wasting the tempo. So E5 instead was played. White plays D5. Now if you do nothing, DC, BC, and the D pawn will be hanging. So either you have to move this knight off of D7, or you have to move the queen. Howard played queen e7. Computer also liked queen over to c7, but I'm not sure there's a huge difference here personally. White now castles. Bishop takes at f3. Bishop takes at f3. And now c5. Closing off the center. And you want the closed position when your opponent has the bishop pair. Howard has the two knights, so he's better off with it closed than with it open. So now a3. The computer actually preferred the immediate knight move to threaten the fork, but this also, of course, looks to push the b pawn as well. h5. Looks like Howard's planning an attack, doesn't it? Now, knight did come into b5, the fork threat. Howard played king f8. I should make a note here, the fact that my brother Howard also for a while had been a French player. So he was familiar with the French lines where black does play king f8. There are lines, I'll let you search them out. I don't have the time in the video for all this. White plays queen d3, linking up the rooks. Natural enough move. Knight plays h6, obviously looking possibly for the f5 push, possibly for the post. b4. b6 to defend, because you don't want takes, push, or even without the push. You don't want to allow your opponent a strong passer. So b4, b6. Rook a2. Likely either planning to double the rooks on the a-file, or maybe the idea of swinging the rook over. I suspect the second is more what was thought of here. a6 forces the knight out, back to c3. Knight now went to g4, looking to maybe get rid of the bishop pair. So, white Karpov decides to retreat the bishop. Bishop went to c1. The computer actually prefers d2, but I can understand why you may not want to block the rank for the rook. Howard now plays queen h4. Go for the cheap shot, go for the cheap shot. It ain't cheap if it works, except it don't work because, of course, the GM sees the shot and plays h3. Now, bishop h6, offering up the knight. Howard wants the open h-file for attacking potential. So now, what happened is bishop took at h6. Now, it might be natural enough for the knight to recapture, but actually Howard played rook takes h6. He's still hoping to get that open h-file in an attack. At this point, rook goes to b1. The idea, of course, is you're going to be trading and having the open b-file, so white is planning on that. Also, this allows the king to be able to move to f1. That becomes important. So, we just had rook b1. Knight d goes to f6. B takes c5, b takes c5. Bishop retreats to d1. You have to be careful to watch out for the capture there. So it could be the plan is simply to trade off the queens. So at this point, knight goes back to e8. obviously looking for that F pawn push. Now we get fun and interesting. H takes G4. So H takes G4, you now have the open file, and if the rook was on F1, a serious mate threat. Instead, king simply goes to F1. Queen H1 check. Careful, Larry. King E2. Queen takes G2. So black now has 2 pawns for the piece. Generally, you need 3 to make it worthwhile, but sometimes 2, if they're strong enough, can do it. So at this point, queen goes to G3. Get the queens off, try to eliminate the attack. Natural enough thought and idea. Queen takes G3, F takes G3. Rook comes to A7. You will see the reason for that in a minute. So after rook A7, king goes to F1. You are now attacking the pawn G4. So the natural response, F5. Rook goes to F2, pinning the knight. Rook comes to F7, removing the pin. And once again, you have the pawns protected. At this point, or actually the turn before, the computer actually gives this as +2 for white. So that's kind of interesting here. Rook comes to B8, pinning the knight. So, you know, the rook wasn't doing a lot down there, and now the knight can't get into things, and there's always the possibility of coming and winning off the A-pawn among other nasty ideas, such as bishop here to win off the knight, if you're not careful. So, where are we again? Oh yeah, rook B8. Rook H1 check. King goes to E2. If king goes to H2, rooks are doubled up with the mate threat. That will force the bishop to take the pawn here. Bishop takes pawn. Rook checks. King moves. Rook takes. King takes. Pawn takes bishop. And you've got, actually, now black is up the doubled up pawn. And his rook is a little bit better. So that is why when the check was played, the king went to E2. F4, because the pawn is no longer attacked by the piece. King D3. Now, you may think takes, you may think push past. Actually, Howard didn't do either of those, although both moves are interesting. Instead, rook came to H3, looking to take the pawn off with check. Knight went to E2, defending the pawn. So at this point, surprisingly enough, Howard played F takes G. I'm not sure why he doesn't push past and take it off with the rook, but he now has 3 pawns for the piece. And, of course, you have tripled up passers on the G file. Irregular everyday turns. You see that in a lot of chess games, don't you, right? So, after f takes g, rook g2, rook f3 check, king goes to d2, and now you pretty much actually have an equal game according to the computer. Rook takes a3, and now it's, at this moment, 4 pawns for the piece, and an extra passer. Very important. Rook comes to g1. Rook goes to h2, pinning the knight. King goes to e1, unpinning the knight. g2, trying to get very threatening. White is actually still plus 0.3 here. Rook goes to b3, wanting to trade off a set of rooks. Rook a1, pinning the bishop. Rook now goes to g3. One other thing I should mention, this was a 40 board simul. The GM Karpov had 38 wins and 2 draws. One draw was, I believe, with Josh Riddell. The other was this game with my brother. And the simul started about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, with the second round scheduled to start at 7 p.m. At 6:30, I think there were still like about a half dozen games going on, and those players still playing were offered the option of taking a half-point bye for the second round and playing on, or just play on and unfortunately make their opponents wait. My brother had drawn his first round game, so he took the second option and made his opponent wait. So it's now almost 8 o'clock, an hour after the round was due to start. So my brother probably was feeling a little guilty, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was actually feeling a little tired, because in his regular round game, with his favorite King's Gambit, he managed to hang his queen on 12 moves. He was very unhappy with that, because the bulletin editor, Josh Flores, who we both knew, published it, and Howard complained, "Why did you publish this horrible game?" And it was like, well, it was an upset. Howard's opponent was about 150 points rated below him. I don't know about the upset, but at this point, knight went to f6, and a draw was offered. And the computer has this as minus plus 1.5, which means black is winning. So, since it's almost 8 o'clock and you're not in a winning position, and it really, I don't think, mattered to the GM at all, he accepted the draw. For that matter, maybe he wanted to go get dinner. Who knows? But it is interesting that at this point, black is very much better, because if you take off the back pawn, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, you now have knight takes at e4. This is now an extremely bad position for white. The bishop is pinned in. There are now multiple passers, more than just one file. And on top of that, the king is very locked into his position. The king can't really move much of anywhere. You pretty much have to move the knight just to be able to get the king up and out. Of course, if white makes a mistake of rook takes g4, rook takes at d1 check, king must take at d1, knight f2 check, followed by knight taking at g4, and you're up 3 pawns in what should be an easily won endgame. So that's not playable. The knight move doesn't necessarily do a lot, because there's always just attacking the bishop again, forcing the rook over, which could lead to problems with the pushes, or just trading and playing with the passers versus the piece. And also you could simply just come back and try to consolidate everything. But I think this move, followed by that, is a huge problem. Because after the push here, you still have problems with that knight. You are going to basically have to, because this would still hang if you move the king, you're going to have to run the knight because you don't have really much choice in the matter. Now this passer is ready to come push all the way down if he's not, White's not careful, and actually simply push here, because then after knight takes, you've got the push here as a problem. But like I said, just simply, it seems like just push. Just run the pawn down his throat. Here, you know, eventually the bishop will come off for the knight, and this passer, and this passer are going to cause great problems. So that covers that game. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you go back over it again. Look at all the intricacies involved. So until next time, goodbye, good luck, and good chess.